My name is Sophie Chen. I'm 34 years old. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind that usually drifted by in silence, broken only by the hum of city life beyond the glass walls of my office. I was on the 42nd floor of Sterling Financial Tower, reviewing quarterly reports, when my assistant placed a fresh cup of coffee beside me. I barely looked up. Numbers had a way of consuming all my attention. Then my phone buzzed. A single text, one that, without warning, would split my life neatly into before and after. Hey, sis, hope you don't mind, but I sold your Honda for $5,000. You never drive it anyway, and I really needed the cash. Thanks for understandings. At first, I thought I had read it wrong. Then I read it again and again. My heart sank as reality began to form around the words like fog revealing a cliff's edge. Marcus had sold my Honda? Except I didn't own a Honda anymore. Not really. I set my coffee down carefully, watching a single ripple tremble on its surface. The McLaren, the 2019 720S Spider, had been parked at my parents' house after last month's family dinner. It was a company vehicle, registered under Apex Capital Management, the firm I'd built from nothing into a $4.2 billion empire in 6 short, ruthless years. Marcus thought he'd sold a rusty old Civic. He had, in fact, just stolen and sold a $347,000 supercar protected by federal corporate theft statutes. For a moment, I just stared out at the skyline. The whole city stretched beneath me, glittering, distant, uncaring. I'd always kept my real life hidden from my family. To them, I was the quiet older sister who worked in finance, who rented a modest apartment, who drove a beat-up sedan to avoid attention. They never knew I was the Sophie Chen, founder, CEO, and sole owner of one of the fastest-growing investment firms on the West Coast. My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "And Ms. Chen, your 3 o'clock meeting is—" "Cancel it," I interrupted, my voice steady, almost cold. "And get David Chin from legal, now." Within seconds, my office phone rang. "Sophie, what's happened?" David's voice carried that lawyer's tone. Calm, clinical, already assessing. "My brother just texted me," I said, forcing the words to sound detached. "He sold company vehicle VIN Sajad 4GX5 CNN01234 for $5,000. The McLaren." There was silence on the other end. Then, carefully, "Sophie, that's a federal-level crime." "I know," I said, staring at the smiling emoji Marcus had added to his message. "File the report immediately. Include the text as evidence." "Sophie, you understand what this means? Your brother could be arrested within hours." "I understand exactly what it means." When I hung up, the room suddenly felt colder. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger's. Expensive suit, perfect hair, unreadable expression. I'd built an empire on discipline and calculated distance, but nothing prepared me for this kind of betrayal. Another text came through. The buyer seemed really excited about the car, said it was rare or something. Anyway, thanks again for being cool about this. Cool. That word stung. He had no idea that rare wasn't just an adjective. It was evidence. Evidence that whoever bought it knew what they were doing. My phone rang again, this time my assistant's voice trembling slightly. "Miss Chen, Agent Rebecca Martinez from the FBI Financial Crimes Division is on line 1. "Put her through." A clear, steady female voice spoke. "Miss Chen, I've reviewed the report from your legal team. Can you confirm that your brother took and sold a 2019 McLaren 720S Spider without authorization?" "That's correct," I said, each word slow, deliberate. "He thought it was my Honda Civic. It was actually a company asset." There was a pause. "Do you know who the buyer is?" "No, but whoever it was knew what they were buying." "Then we'll proceed as a grand theft investigation under federal jurisdiction. Please don't contact your brother. We'll need to question him directly." I stared at the city lights flickering below, my pulse loud in my ears. "Understood," I said softly. When the call ended, silence filled the office, thick, suffocating. I picked up my phone one last time and looked at Marcus's message again. How had we come to this? The brother I'd once defended from every bad decision had just unknowingly dragged himself into a federal crime, and I was the one who had to turn him in. I took a long breath, my hand trembling only slightly as I set the phone down. "He thought he'd sold a Honda," I whispered to myself. He had no idea he'd just sold his freedom. The next morning, my phone rang before sunrise. My mother's number flashed across the screen. Her voice was frantic, trembling. Sophie, something terrible's happened. The police, no, the FBI, came to Marcus's apartment. They said it was about a stolen car. They took him away in handcuffs. What's going on? They said your name. My chest tightened. I'd known it was coming. I just hadn't expected it to sound like this. Mom, I said quietly, you need to sit down. Tell me what's happening, she pleaded. They said you filed a complaint against your own brother. I closed my eyes. How do you explain to your mother that your success and your brother's ignorance had just collided in the worst way possible? Marcus didn't steal from me, I began slowly. He stole from my company. Your company? Yes. The car he sold wasn't a Honda, Mom. It was a McLaren, a company vehicle, worth about $350,000. There was a long silence. I could almost hear her confusion twisting into disbelief. Sophie, stop it. That's ridiculous. You don't own a car like that. You work in finance. How could you afford— I don't just work in finance, I said, interrupting softly. I am finance. I stared out the window at the city I secretly owned pieces of. I'm the CEO of Apex Capital Management, I continued. It's my firm. I founded it 6 years ago. The line went silent again, the kind of silence that carries both shock and grief. Finally, my father's voice cut in, rough and bewildered. Sophie, what are you talking about? You live in that little apartment. You drive that old car. Are you saying all of that was a lie? No, I said. It was a choice. And it was. A choice I made long ago, after years of being dismissed, overshadowed by Marcus, the charming son who could do no wrong. I'd kept my success hidden to see if love in our family was unconditional or transactional. Now I had my answer. At noon, Agent Rebecca Martinez called again. Miss Chen, your brother's been detained. He's confused, cooperative. He insists it was a misunderstanding. I believe him, I replied, but that doesn't erase the crime. I understand, the agent said. We'll interview him again this afternoon. I'd advise you not to intervene directly yet. After she hung up, I sat in silence, the weight of everything pressed against my chest. The office that usually made me feel powerful now felt like a cage of glass, transparent, cold, inescapable. I remembered the last time I saw Marcus. He'd shown up at my parents' house, laughing, tossing his keys on the counter, teasing me about my boring job. You should live a little, sis. Not everyone has to count pennies for a living. I'd smiled politely then, pretending not to care. He didn't know that while he was drowning in debt, I was negotiating deals worth millions, quietly saving his credit behind the scenes, paying off one of his smaller loans anonymously, hoping he'd never find out. He never did. By the evening, the news reached my sister Jennifer. Her message was short and sharp. Did you seriously turn Marcus in? What kind of person does that to their own family? I didn't reply. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't sound cruel or defensive. In my office, the city's glow had turned into 1,000 points of light. Each one a tiny lie I'd told. The fake modesty, the quiet apartment, the old car I kept just to look normal. A knock came at the door. My assistant peeked in hesitantly. Miss Chen, are you all right? The press hasn't caught wind yet, but— Don't worry about the press, I said. Worry about the truth. It has a way of catching up to everyone. She lingered, then nodded and slipped out, closing the door softly behind her. That night I called my parents again. My mother's voice was small. They say Marcus could face years in prison. Can't you do something? I can get him a good lawyer. That's all I can do. It's a federal case now. But Sophie, she whispered, you're rich, powerful. Surely you can make this go away. I swallowed hard. Power doesn't erase the law, Mom. It just makes the consequences harder to ignore. There was silence again, and then softly, Why didn't you ever tell us who you really were? My voice cracked for the first time that day. Because I needed to know if you'd still love me without knowing what I had. After the call, I stared at the McLaren's registration papers on my desk. The car had been a symbol of my achievement. Sleek, beautiful, untouchable. Now it was evidence in a federal case against my brother. The irony was brutal. I'd built a billion-dollar empire to protect my family's future, and now that same empire might destroy it. I leaned back in my chair, eyes burning, whispering to no one. For years, I'd hidden the truth to protect my family. Now that truth had destroyed us. 2 days later, I found myself standing in the cold marble lobby of the Federal Detention Center. I'd spent the past 48 hours coordinating with lawyers, freezing company accounts tied to the McLaren, and trying to breathe between waves of guilt and exhaustion. But nothing, not a courtroom, not a billion-dollar negotiation, could have prepared me for the moment when I saw my brother behind glass. Marcus looked smaller. His usually careless grin was gone. His hair was a mess, his face pale. When his eyes met mine, the flicker of recognition turned into something else, shame. He picked up the phone on his side of the glass. "Sophie," he said, his voice cracking. "I swear, I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "I know," I replied softly. "You thought it was my old Honda." He nodded quickly. "Yes, I really thought—" "Marcus," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "You sold a McLaren registered under my company. It's worth $347,000. He blinked, confused. "Wait, your company?" "Yes," I said, watching his expression change as the words sank in. "Apex Capital Management. I own it." "Owned it." He froze. "You own Apex? You're the CEO?" I nodded. The silence that followed felt heavier than the glass between us. Marcus leaned back, pressing a trembling hand to his forehead. "So all this time, all these years, you were rich?" "I was successful," I corrected quietly. "There's a difference." His voice rose. "And you didn't tell us? You let us think you were just some desk worker struggling to make rent while you were out there living like this?" "Like what?" I asked sharply. "Like someone who worked 16-hour days, built something from scratch, and didn't want to be treated differently by her own family?" Marcus looked away, guilt flickering in his eyes. "You should have told me, Sophie. I could have come to you instead of stealing what you thought was a worthless car." He shut his eyes. "Marcus," I continued, "you've been drowning in debt for years. Gambling, payday loans, lying to mom and dad. I wanted to help you, but I couldn't fix something you refused to admit was broken." His voice cracked. "I didn't steal it, Sophie. I thought I was borrowing the old Honda to help a friend." The keys looked the same. I stared at him for a long moment. Intent doesn't erase consequence. After the visit, I met with his lawyer, Patricia Williams, in a small conference room near the courthouse. She was sharp, composed, the kind of woman who could command silence just by walking into a room. "Your brother's case is complicated," she began, sliding a folder toward me. "On paper, it's grand theft of corporate property, but the FBI's already uncovered something deeper." "What do you mean?" I asked. She opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots of online listings: cars, electronics, jewelry, each traced back to accounts under Marcus's name. "He's been selling high-value items online for months," Patricia explained. "The McLaren sale was just the one that triggered federal attention. They think he might have been used by a theft ring, maybe without realizing it." I closed my eyes, the air leaving my lungs in a slow exhale. So he wasn't just desperate, he was desperate and stupid. Patricia gave a half smile. "Desperation makes good bait. They probably found him through his gambling circles." I nodded slowly. "If he helps them recover the car and identify the buyers, can that reduce his sentence?" "Yes. Cooperation could mean probation instead of prison time." I stared down at the photos. Marcus smiling at family dinners. Marcus with his arm around me on my birthday. Marcus laughing as if the world could never touch him. "He's not evil," I said finally. "He's just lost." Patricia closed the file. "Then let's help him find his way back." That night, I sat alone in my penthouse, the one I'd never let my family see. The city spread beneath me like a constellation of mistakes. On the table sat 2 photographs, one of me standing beside the McLaren, the other of my family from years ago, before money and secrets had divided us. I picked up my phone and opened my sister Jennifer's message again. "You ruined this family." My fingers hovered over the reply button, then stopped. I deleted the message instead. The next morning, Agent Martinez called. "Miss Chen," she said, "we've identified the buyer. He's connected to a known car theft network operating across 3 states. Your brother's cooperation could help us shut it down." "So it was organized crime," I said quietly. "Yes, and it looks like your brother's transaction provided the evidence we needed to open the case." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Of course, Marcus finally does something useful, and it lands him in federal custody." The agent's tone softened slightly. "He's lucky to have a sister like you, Miss Chen. Most people in your position wouldn't lift a finger." Maybe not, I murmured, but most people in my position never had to raise their brothers like a second parent. That night, I drove out to my parents' house, the same place where Marcus had taken the keys 2 weeks earlier. The living room looked exactly as it always had. Same curtains, same faint smell of jasmine tea, same family photo above the mantel. My mother opened the door with red-rimmed eyes. "Why are you here, Sophie?" she asked, her voice breaking. "To tell you the truth," I said simply, "all of it." My father stood in the doorway behind her, arms crossed. "We've heard enough truth for a lifetime." "Then you should hear mine," I said. For the next 20 minutes, I told them everything. About Apex, about my decision to hide my success, about why I'd stayed quiet. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, my father spoke. "You built an empire and couldn't trust your own family with it?" "I trusted you," I said softly. "I just didn't trust how you'd see me after you knew." He shook his head. "We didn't raise you to lie. And I didn't expect you to only love me when I was small enough to control," I said, my voice trembling but steady. For the first time, I saw the truth in their eyes. Not anger, but realization. Our family had been built on illusions. Marcus's charm, my humility, their pride. All of it was performance. And now the curtain had finally fallen. "I thought I'd seen every betrayal a family could commit," I whispered, mostly to myself. I was wrong. The following week blurred into a storm of headlines, lawyer calls, and sleepless nights. Every time my phone rang, I half expected it to be Marcus. It never was. Patricia Williams called one afternoon while I was reviewing client portfolios at Apex. "Sophie, the FBI just confirmed what we suspected. The buyer who paid Marcus the $5,000 is part of a high-end car theft ring. They use people with clean records, desperate ones, to move stolen vehicles across state lines." I pressed my hand to my temple. So Marcus wasn't just unlucky, he was chosen. Patricia's voice softened. He was groomed. Someone in his gambling circles likely fed him the idea. Easy money, no questions asked. They probably told him it was a simple favor. I felt a cold, hollow ache in my stomach, and he believed them. "Yes, but the Bureau thinks his cooperation could help them close the case. He's willing to talk." I hesitated. Willing or scared? "Both," Patricia admitted. "They're offering a plea deal if he helps recover the car and identifies the ring's members." When I hung up, I didn't go back to work. I just sat there, staring at my reflection in the glass wall of my office. Polished, powerful, untouchable. It was a mask I'd worn too long. Underneath, I felt every crack. That evening, I drove to the FBI's downtown field office to meet Agent Rebecca Martinez in person. The building was sterile. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, the scent of burnt coffee and anxiety. She met me in a small interview room, clipboard in hand. "Miss Chen," she greeted, shaking my hand firmly. "Thank you for coming. We're making progress." I nodded. "I've been updated. You found the buyer." "Yes, and your brother's cooperation is crucial. He's agreed to identify additional names from his gambling contacts." Her tone shifted. Less procedural, more human. "I have to ask, Miss Chen, are you sure you want to stay involved? You could easily step back and let the legal system run its course." I met her eyes. "I can't. He's still my brother." She gave a small, knowing smile. "Most people in your position would have cut him off by now." "Most people didn't spend half their childhood cleaning up his messes," I said quietly. Agent Martinez studied me for a moment. "You sound angry." "I am," I admitted. At him, at myself, at how easy it was for me to build an empire and how impossible it seems to save my own family. She nodded slowly, jotting something down. "The irony of success," she said. "It always comes with a price." Later that night, I sat in my car outside my parents' house again. The porch light was on, casting that same soft glow I remembered from childhood. My mother's silhouette passed by the window. She was pacing, worrying, like she used to when Marcus came home late as a teenager. I didn't go in. I just watched from the car, realizing that despite everything, nothing had changed. Marcus was still the storm, and I was still the one standing in its aftermath, pretending not to get soaked. I thought back to that decision 6 years ago, to hide my wealth, to keep my identity as Apex's founder secret. I told myself it was noble, that I wanted to see who my family really was. But maybe it hadn't been noble at all. Maybe it was punishment, a way to silently prove that they only respected success when they could measure it. And now that experiment had exploded in all our faces. The next day, Patricia called again. Sophie, you should know something, she said cautiously. During the investigation, the FBI found text messages between Marcus and one of the ring members. They mentioned a payment, a finder's fee. I frowned. How much? $10,000. It looks like they promised him that for delivering the car. I sank into my chair. So he wasn't just tricked, he agreed to it. Patricia hesitated. It's complicated. The messages show hesitation on his part. He thought it was a small job, a quick favor. But legally, it doesn't matter. It implies intent. I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers against my eyes. He thought he was finally going to fix everything. Instead, he sold his way into a criminal investigation. That night, Marcus called me from the detention center. His voice was low, raw. Sophie, I told them everything. Names, numbers, even the account that wired me the money. They said I might get probation. That's good, I said quietly. He paused. I'm sorry, Sophie, for all of it. For being the reason you had to tell Mom and Dad. For humiliating you. I swallowed. You didn't humiliate me, Marcus. You reminded me who I really am. Someone who hides behind success because she's afraid to be judged by her own family. He went silent. You really think this is your fault? Partly, I admitted. If I hadn't kept secrets, maybe you wouldn't have made this mistake. Maybe you would have asked me for help. Sophie, he said softly, I never would have asked. You were different, distant. I didn't want to disappoint you again. His words sank deep, sharper than any accusation, because for once he was right. After the call, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how every choice, every lie, every silence had stacked up like glass walls between us. We'd built a family where truth was a threat and pride was armor. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The lights flickered like dying stars, reflected faintly on the McLaren's missing silhouette in my mind. If my silence made him desperate, if my pride made him blind, then maybe I wasn't just the victim of his crime. Maybe I was part of it. 3 weeks later, the headlines were everywhere. Billionaire CEO's brother involved in federal car theft case. Family ties and fortune, the scandal behind Apex Capital. Every photo was of me, leaving the courthouse, expression unreadable, Marcus behind me in cuffs. No one cared that he hadn't meant to commit the crime. They cared about the story, the powerful sister, the fallen brother, the empire built on secrets. I'd worked my whole life to control every narrative about me. Now I was the story I couldn't rewrite. That morning, Patricia called. Sophie, the U.S. Attorney's Office is considering a plea deal, she said. Marcus's cooperation led to 6 arrests and the recovery of over $2 million in stolen vehicles. They're willing to reduce his charges to a single count of grand theft with probation and community service. I closed my eyes, relief and sorrow clashing inside me. He'll avoid prison? Yes, if the judge approves. Good, I whispered. That's something. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Not legally, not emotionally. That evening, I called a family meeting. My parents, Marcus, and my sister Jennifer gathered in the living room, the same one where we'd celebrated birthdays, fought over the TV remote, and pretended everything was fine. Marcus sat across from me, thinner now, his confidence stripped away. Jennifer leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes wary. My parents sat together, holding hands like they were clinging to the last piece of peace they had left. I took a deep breath. Before we talk about Marcus's case, I need to talk about us. My mother frowned. What do you mean? I mean the truth, I said. The truth we've all been avoiding for years. I stood, pacing slowly. For 6 years, I've been living a double life. You thought I was struggling to make rent. In reality, I was building a company worth billions. Jennifer scoffed quietly. You make it sound noble. It wasn't noble, I admitted. It was pride. I wanted to know who you all were when you thought I had nothing. Marcus stared at the floor. My father leaned forward. And what did you learn? I met his eyes. That when Marcus needed help, he didn't ask. He took. That none of you ever asked what I was working toward because you'd already decided who I was. The quiet one. The one who didn't need attention. My mother's voice trembled. We loved you both the same. No, I said gently. You loved Marcus louder. Every mistake he made was forgiven before he even apologized. Every success of mine was treated like luck. Tears welled in her eyes. That's not true. It is, Marcus said suddenly, his voice breaking the air like glass. Everyone turned to him. She's right, he said, voice low. You always saw me as the one who needed saving, and you saw her as the one who didn't. You made me feel like I could get away with anything, and I acted like it." My father looked stricken. "Marcus, no, Dad, I need to say this." Marcus turned to me. "Sophie, I didn't steal the car because I wanted to hurt you. I stole it because I didn't think anything you owned mattered. I thought you were barely scraping by. I thought I was helping myself to something worthless." I let out a shaky breath. "And now?" He swallowed hard. "Now I realize I've been worthless to the one person who always helped me." The room fell silent. Later, after everyone left, Marcus lingered by the door. "Patricia says I'll be sentenced next week," he said quietly. "Community service, probably. I'll make it right, Sophie, I swear." I nodded, though part of me still ached with doubt. "You can't undo what you did, but you can learn from it." He smiled faintly. "Guess you finally get to be the responsible one again." "I never stopped," I said softly. That night, I sat alone in my office, watching the city lights pulse like a heartbeat. The phone buzzed, a message from Agent Martinez. Case officially closed. Marcus's cooperation led to the dismantling of the theft ring. "You did the right thing." I stared at the words. The right thing, maybe legally, but morally, emotionally, I wasn't sure anymore. Because the truth had set us free, yes, but it had also left scars no one could see. A week later, Marcus stood before the judge. His voice was clear but trembling. "I take full responsibility for what I did. I made choices without thinking. I hurt people who trusted me, especially my sister. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want the chance to earn it." The judge nodded. Sentence, 2 years probation, and 500 hours of community service. It was merciful. It was fair. And it still broke me to watch him walk out of that courtroom not as my brother, but as a man who'd finally faced himself. That night he called me. "Sophie," he said, "thank you." "For what?" "For not letting me rot in denial." I laughed softly, tears in my throat. "Don't thank me yet. You still have to show me you can live without gambling, without lies." "I will," he said. "You'll see." For the first time in years, I believed him. When I hung up, I sat in the quiet, staring out over the glittering skyline. My reflection looked tired, older, but real, stripped of pretense. "The law can forgive him," I murmured to myself. But can I? I didn't know the answer yet, but I was finally ready to find out. 6 months passed. The scandal faded from headlines. The shock dulled into silence. And life began stitching itself back together, not neatly, but honestly. Marcus had completed half of his community service by then, volunteering at a rehabilitation center that counseled people with gambling addictions. Every week, he'd call to tell me stories. Not about himself, but about others. The ones who lost everything over a single bad bet. The ones who were too proud to ask for help until it was too late. Sometimes I could hear the guilt in his voice when he said, "They remind me of me." Other times, there was something else. Quiet determination. I wanted to believe that meant he'd changed. A few weeks later, he came to see me at Apex Capital. He stood in my office doorway wearing the same cheap suit he'd worn to court, but his posture was different. Straighter, steadier. "I was serious when I said I wanted to earn back your trust," he said. "You once told me I didn't know the difference between taking and earning. I want to change that." I studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You start as a junior analyst. No special treatment. You'll work for what you keep." His eyes widened. "You'd actually hire me?" "I'm not doing this for you," I said. "I'm doing it for me, so I can finally stop wondering if I made a mistake by forgiving you." He gave a small, sad smile. "Fair enough." And that was how Marcus, my reckless, impulsive brother, became the lowest-ranking employee at the company I built from the ground up. It wasn't easy. The first month, he stumbled through reports, forgot terms, showed up late once. But instead of making excuses, he apologized, something he'd never done before. By the 3rd month, he was volunteering for late shifts. By the 4th, he'd paid off the first of his gambling debts. And for the first time, I saw flashes of the brother I used to believe in, the one who could make anyone laugh, who once promised he'd make something of himself someday. He finally was. Family dinners changed too. We no longer pretended everything was fine. We talked, really talked, about money, about mistakes, about the years I spent hiding my success out of fear they'd see me differently. My father, quieter than ever, finally admitted, "I used to think success meant never needing anyone. You proved me wrong. It means knowing when to stand alone and when to reach out." My mother reached across the table and took my hand. "We were wrong to judge you for hiding what you built. but we're proud of what you built yourself into." For the first time in years, I believed her. Jennifer, who had barely spoken to me since the arrest, cleared her throat awkwardly. "You know, I thought you did all of this to prove a point, but maybe you were just trying to protect yourself." I smiled faintly. "Maybe both." Marcus chuckled. "You've always been impossible to figure out." I looked at him. "And you've always been impossible to ignore." He grinned. "Guess we're even." That night, after dinner, Marcus and I stood outside watching the city lights flicker in the distance. "Do you ever miss the way things were?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I miss believing we were fine when we weren't." He was quiet for a moment. "You know, for years I thought money could fix everything. Turns out it just makes the cracks show faster." I turned to him. "Money doesn't break families, Marcus. Secrets do." He nodded slowly. "Then I think I'm done keeping them." For once I believed him. A year after his arrest, the McLaren was recovered. It was damaged. Dented panels, cracked windshield, scars from a police chase across state lines. When it was returned to Apex, one of my managers asked if I wanted it repaired or replaced. "Repair it," I said. "Some things are worth fixing, even when they're no longer perfect." That evening, Marcus stopped by my penthouse after work. He stood by the window, staring down at the city. "You ever think we'll be the same again?" he asked. "No," I said, "but maybe that's not a bad thing." He nodded, understanding. "You forgave me, didn't you?" I smiled faintly. "I forgave you the day it happened, Marcus, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to believe someone can change." He met my eyes. "And have I?" "You're getting there," I said. He laughed quietly. "I'll take that." After he left, I poured myself a glass of wine and looked out over the skyline, the same one that once symbolized everything I'd built alone. Now, it reminded me of something else, that the higher you climb, the more fragile the ground beneath you becomes. Because success doesn't test who you are when you're poor. It tests who your family becomes when you finally have something to lose. I thought of Marcus's trembling hands that first day in the detention center, my parents' disbelief, Jennifer's anger, and then the quiet dinners, the honest conversations, the slow rebuilding of something we'd all taken for granted. In the end, the car wasn't what we lost. It was the illusion that love could survive without truth. And now that the truth was finally out, maybe, just maybe, we could start being a family again.